this section, we're going to look at the different models for change, for reform, and look at the different countries that Korea's looked to as these models for reform. So we're going to see the approaches from the United States, from Japan, and also from Russia, and look at how their different ideas were related to Korea's domestic circumstances in the 1890s. To really understand this section, students should already have an understanding of imperialism, particularly Western imperialism, in the 19th century and in East Asia. Students will also want to consider some very basic questions like, why is it important to have a diplomatic mission? Why do we have embassies and consulates and legations and things like these? In the previous lecture, we took a look at Horace Allen. He was the first American Christian missionary to arrive in Korea. He arrived in 1884, and after saving Min Young-ik's life after the Kapshin coup d'etat, he was appointed as a doctor. He was granted by the king Hong Young-sik's house, where he reformed it into Gwanghaewon, which was a Western-style medical clinic. Horace Allen in 1887 participated in appointing the Korean Minister of the United States with Park Jong-young. So we can see that although the American Christian missionary stance was to try to stay out of the political situation and to focus on the medical mission and education, Horace Allen begins to start to advise the king and dabble in Korean politics. By 1895, Horace Allen had pretty much left behind his role as a Christian missionary and took on a more official role, liaising between Korea and the United States. So, for example, in 1895, he negotiated the mining concession in Unsan and the construction of a railroad between Seoul and Incheon in 1896. In 1897, as the U.S. Consul General in Seoul, he negotiated the construction of railroads and lamps. Later on, in 1901, he was appointed as the American Minister of Korea, but was fired in 1905 since he protested against the Protectorate Treaty, and as the Japanese increased their influence in Korea, many foreigners were forcefully removed. But what we can see here is that Horace Allen, as the American representative in Korea, and although he had prior experience living in Korea and knew the Koreans well, even had a personal relationship with the Korean king, he still had America's interests in mind as he came back to Korea in this official capacity. Another figure to examine is Kaoru Unouye. So he was born in a lower samurai family, and in 1876 was one of the Japanese representatives who signed the Ganghwa Treaty. By 1885, he became the Minister of Foreign Affairs. in 1894, he was the Joseon minister of Japan, or the Japanese minister to Korea. So he was involved in Korea when the Sino-Japanese War broke out in 1894, and simultaneously the Kabul reforms were being implemented. But we see here too that he begins to intervene in Korean domestic affairs. He intervened in the appointing of Park Yong-hyo to the cabinet in Korea. And then in 1895, after Japan defeated defeated China in the Sino-Japanese War, and the Treaty of Shimonoseki was signed, there were certain treaty points that had been agreed upon between Qing China and Japan as a result of China's defeat, but the three countries, Russia, France, and Germany, they decided to intervene because they did not like the terms that Japan had subjected China to, and so this was called the Triple Intervention. And Japan, being powerless to defend itself against these three countries, had to agree. There was also upheaval in the Joseon cabinet during the time that Kaoru Unouye was in Korea, and there was a transition from Park Yong-hyo to Kim Hong-jip. And then we have the succeeding minister of Japan, Miura Goro, who then was instrumental in the assassination of Queen Min. So this particular Japanese official in Korea was in the country at a time of great upheaval. Another diplomat in Korea during this time was Karl Weber. And Weber was a diplomat of the Russian Empire. In 1884, he had been a representative in signing the Treaty of Amity and Commerce between Korea and Russia, and in 1885 was the Russian minister to Joseon in Seoul. In 1895, the Russian Empire appointed Speyer, but both Weber and Ko Jung refused his replacement. But Weber was also involved with that triple intervention against Japan. In fact, he led the triple intervention and was in the country during the assassination of Queen Min. So Weber too was in the country during this very tumultuous time period. After the assassination of Queen Min, Weber tried to move the king, Ko Jung, to the American legation, but failed. And so eventually Ko Jung would take refuge at the Russian legation. And as a result of Ko Jung staying at the Russian legation, he became more pro-Russian and appointed a new pro-Russian cabinet. But he was eventually replaced by Speyer in 1897.